The old man had something stuck in his mouth. It looked like a piece of stone. The paramedic wanted to help him get it out.
It's his tongue.
Just moments ago, the landlord called 911. The old man living alone had been missing for 2 days. She suspected he had had an accident. She hurriedly brought the paramedics into the house to check. They found the old man lying on the sofa. He looked to be in bad shape. Gabby quickly checked his pulse. The old man's expression was very painful. Gabby asked him where it hurt, but the old man stuttered and couldn't speak. The old man opened his mouth. There was a lump of black stuff inside. Gabby told him to spit it out, but the old man just kept shaking his head. Sylvie was curious about it. He opened his mouth again. A foul smell hit them.
Wow, that is a strong odor.
Gabby felt it was blocking him and attempted to help him get it out. He cried out in pain. Gabby stood there, shocked. It turned out to be his tongue. Gabby suspected he accidentally bit his tongue, and later gangrene set in. She comforted the old man not to panic. She would give him fluids to hydrate him, then take him to the hospital for antibiotic treatment. Everything would be okay. A man named John bought some nuggets. After counting them, he found 3 pieces missing. It was supposed to be 12 pieces, but there were only 9. He immediately demanded an explanation from the staff. The staff said the nuggets were sold out and he had only paid for 9. John was instantly displeased upon hearing this. "How are 9 pieces enough for my wife?" he exclaimed. His wife tried to calm him down.
And it is a big deal. You ordered 12 nuggets, you deserve 12 nuggets.
We're not leaving until my wife gets 3 more nuggets.
Just then the staff said,
"She doesn't need any more nuggets."
It completely enraged John. Soon after, the firefighters received an emergency call. When they arrived at the scene, they found John stuck in the drive-thru window, unable to get in or out. The paramedics asked if he was injured, and John replied, "My dignity is hurt, but I'm fine otherwise." At that moment, John caught sight of the nuggets in the store. He got agitated again, accusing the staff of being a liar. The captain tried to calm him down, stating they needed to get him out quickly. They applied lubricant on him and tried to pull him out.
1, 2, 3.
Stop!
Then the captain spotted a bucket of lard in the store. They smeared the lard on John and tried again. Finally, John was freed, which caused the bystanders to burst into laughter. Some even recorded the entire process on their phones. For safety reasons, the firefighters sent John to the hospital. A few days later, John attended his son's wrestling match. Just as his son was about to win, the opponent launched a sneak attack. John was furious, trembling as he watched his son hit the ground hard. Seeing the smug look on the opponent's face, he couldn't hold back anymore. He rushed forward.
911, what's your emergency? Some psycho dad just tried to kill my kid.
Instead of hurting anyone, John got himself stuck in the bleachers. The firefighters arrived to find a familiar scene. That stance looks familiar, so does that rear. The captain crawled underneath. Sure enough, it was John again.
In another pickle, huh?
The paramedic checked if he was hurt, and John repeated, "I'm too humiliated to feel pain." But this time he made a request, "Please no more lard." He said #LardDass is still trending. The captain reassured him, "We'll use a saw this time." However, the captain advised John to see a therapist as his anger issues were harmful to himself and others. The firefighters began sawing the bleachers to free him. Once he was out surrounded by people taking pictures, John decided to follow the captain's advice. The next day, with his family by his side, John drove to the therapist's office. On the way, he promised his wife he'd change his temper and become a calm person. Just then, a drunk driver behind them honked incessantly. John wanted to lose his temper, but remembered his promise and held back. Even letting the truck pass, to his surprise, the driver performed a brake check. John managed to avoid a collision, but then the drunk driver pulled out a gun. Everyone was terrified. The driver threw a bottle at John's car before flipping his truck and setting it on fire. John, startled, accidentally crashed into the car ahead. The firefighters quickly arrived on the scene. Seeing John, the captain assumed it was his fault again. John hurriedly explained the situation and begged them to save his wife and son. The paramedic assured him the second ambulance was on its way and they needed to focus on rescuing the driver trapped in the burning truck. This enraged John.
You mean the guy who tried to kill my family?
The captain calmed him down. After extinguishing the fire, the paramedics rescued the driver and loaded him onto a stretcher. The captain heard the driver had a gun and ordered a search of the truck, but nothing was found. Suddenly, John pulled a gun from his pocket. The captain tried to stop him, but it was too late. John fired 4 shots, killing the driver on the spot. Everyone was stunned. The captain asked John why he did it. John calmly responded,
"He hurt my family."
Firefighters were dispatched to the prison to extinguish a fire. Unexpectedly, they were threatened by armed prisoners. However, the prisoners' actions were not for escape, but for another purpose. A few minutes earlier, the firefighters received an emergency call and headed to the prison. Once inside the cells, they discovered that the ventilation ducts had been maliciously blocked by the prisoners. While the firefighters were putting out the fire, some inmates deliberately caused disruptions. Not only did they refuse to cooperate, but they even made the situation worse. What should have been resolved in a minute ended up taking 10 minutes of effort. The fire had been caused caused by the prisoners tampering with the electrical sockets. Just then the cells suddenly lost power when the emergency lights came on. The firefighters found themselves surrounded by vicious prisoners. At that moment, the cell doors automatically locked. The firefighters carefully exited through the emergency passage. Fortunately, the prisoners did not follow them. Led by a bald prison guard, the firefighters arrived at another cell. Strangely, the prisoners there had all been released. A long-haired prisoner claimed that the guards had let them out. However, the firefighters soon discovered a guard's body in the maintenance tunnel. The situation was no longer about extinguishing a fire. Lieutenant Casey immediately reported to the chief outside, but the earlier power outage had locked most of the prison doors, making it impossible for reinforcements to get in. To make matters worse, the keys on the dead guard were missing. The bald prison guard, who already despised the prisoners, was furious that his colleague had died at their hands. He decided to teach them a lesson, but suddenly a knife appeared behind him. The knife wielder was the prisoner from earlier. He demanded the guard help them escape. Left with no choice, Casey negotiated with the guard to lure the prisoners to a chapel smoke-free area. Casey then tried to convince the prisoners to stop, but as hardened criminals, they had no fear of adding another murder charge to their records. Herman, who had been taken hostage, was especially desperate. He was expecting to become a father that day. Casey offered to trade places with Herman, but the prisoner rejected the idea. They demanded to trade for the bald prison guard instead. It turned out the prisoners never intended to escape, but simply wanted to kill the guard from the start. Just then a message came through the radio. Herman's wife had just given birth to a baby boy, but the premature baby was suffering from oxygen deprivation and in critical condition. Hearing this, Herman broke free from his restraints. The firefighters were then forced into a small room by the prisoners, where danger was imminent. At that moment, a teammate's voice came through the radio, saying they had located the fire source. However, Casey stopped them from extinguishing the fire, instructing them to open the smoke dampers instead. Coincidentally, the prison's power was restored at that moment. Smoke was blown directly into the area where the prisoners were. They were overwhelmed by the smoke, giving Casey a chance to negotiate. Casey promised to leave the prison guard behind if the prisoners let the firefighters go. The prisoner immediately agreed. However, after the firefighters left, the guard was nowhere to be found in the room. It turned out the guard had disguised himself in firefighter gear and escaped. Herman's first move after escaping was to rush to the hospital, a police car. When he arrived at the ward, he was too afraid to face his wife. After taking a moment to gather himself, he forced a smile and hugged her, believing their baby could not have survived. But just then the nurse appeared holding the baby. It was merely a false alarm.
Oh, man, look at him.
Never had seen such a crazy man. On the snowy road, he started doing this dangerous thing. Excited man even had his friend do a live broadcast. But then, a pickup truck suddenly rushed from behind. Blocked by the way, the truck kept honking incessantly. Annoyed man burst into curses. Helplessly, the truck driver attempted to overtake by accelerating, but the ice on the roof suddenly cracked. His friend hurriedly called 911. The thick ice pinned the man down. Luckily, the man was still alive, but the situation was dire. He needed to be rushed to the hospital for surgery, but the ice was too heavy to move. Paramedics needed to remove some ice. However, the cutting process was extremely risky. If the ice cracked, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fortunately, paramedics successfully removed the excess ice. Then the man was lifted onto a stretcher and put into an ambulance. However, due to the high temperature inside the vehicle, as the ice melted, a gush of blood suddenly sprayed out. They needed to refreeze the melted ice. The two hurriedly gathered snow and ice.